Hi, this is Peter Schiff. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2009. Well, this is my last day in the Middle East. I'll be leaving Abu Dhabi in the morning. Of course, as I've left, President Barack Obama has made his way out here. He is in Saudi Arabia. Next stop is Egypt. But, I think this is part of the dog and pony show to try to convince our creditors to keep buying our bonds. His boy Geithner was in China. And here he is in the Middle East. A lot of our bonds, the Saudis buy a lot of our bonds. And, what's he trying to assure them? He's telling them that don't worry about these huge deficits. Don't worry about inflation. We're going to get our act under control. We're just running these deficits now to stimulate the economy. And as soon as the economy is back on its feet and moving better, the president is assuring our creditors that we are going to act fiscally responsibly. We are going to rein in these deficits. We're going to cut spending or raise taxes or do whatever it takes. We're just not going to do it now. And of course, you can't believe what they say. You got to believe what they do. They're not going to act responsibly. No politicians do. This is what they have to say. They can't tell the truth, or nobody would lend them a quarter. So they lie. I mean, who is he kidding? Even under President Clinton, where we supposedly had a couple of years of surpluses, they weren't real surpluses. The national debt grew every year of the Clinton presidency. Of course, the Saudis, they want to support the U.S. economy where they think we're a good customer. Of course, we're really not because they have to lend us the money to buy their oil. But they think they're helping us out by buying our bonds. We're telling them that we're all in this together. Well, the Saudis are helping to undermine our economy, as are other creditors, by buying our government bonds. One of the big problems is our government is spending too much money, and they're getting the money from the people who are buying the bonds. And the government is using this money to grow, to get bigger, which is undermining our economy. They're using it to subsidize activity that we want to stop. They're using it to prop up companies that should fail. We're worse off as a result of this money, and because it's going to make our economy less competitive, it's going to be even more difficult to pay it back. I mean, the one thing I say to the Saudis, and everybody else for that matter, is stop doing us favors. We can't afford them anymore. And, along this propaganda sales pitch, Ben Bernanke was up on Capitol Hill talking in front of the House Budget Committee today. Again, I didn't see the whole thing, but what I did see was pretty terrifying. I wouldn't want to own any U.S. Treasuries after watching him testify. But there were a lot of interesting questions. One person asked him if he was worried about inflation, and his answer was, I see no signs whatsoever of inflation. And was the guy blind? I mean, maybe he is. I guess he's got so much ink in his eyes from all the money he's been printing. And of course, he's causing the inflation. Asking me if he sees any signs of it, the whole question is ridiculous. Then another thing that he was asked was, are you worried, about these deficits? Can we keep running these deficits in perpetuity? What's going to happen to interest rates or the economy or our credit rating? And he acknowledged that, no, we can't run the deficits indefinitely, but that the government was going to rein them in, that the president was going to make the tough choices and they were going to cut spending or raise taxes and they were going to bring the budget back into line. And when he was asked, well, what indication do you have that this is actually going to happen? He said, well, they're talking about it. Well, who cares what they talk about? They need to do it. And the idea is the only reason that they can act so irresponsibly is because Ben Bernanke is allowing it. He's supposed to be independent. He's supposed to be putting an end to these deficits by refusing to monetize them, by raising interest rates, by not doing quantitative easing. In fact, Bernanke actually said that he was not going to monetize the deficits. Well, that's exactly what he's doing. That's exactly what quantitative easing is. And of course, another comment he made that was laughable, he said that if it wasn't for this massive stimulus, if it wasn't for the bailouts and the TARP, that we would have had a catastrophe in this country. And so the Federal Reserve and the government helped to avert the catastrophe. Well, first of all, they created the catastrophe. How can they take credit for getting us out of it? That's like an arsonist, lighting a house on fire and then claiming credit for putting it out. He lit the fire. And then, of course, to assume that we would have had a catastrophe without the stimulus and bailouts, how do we know how big a catastrophe the stimulus and bailouts are going to create? Remember, the reason we're in this mess is because of the stimulus in 2001 and 2002 that got us out of that depression or recession that George Bush bragged about and that Alan Greenspan bragged about, and now this is a mess. So the jury's still out, and I'm convinced that the catastrophe that the stimuluses and the bailouts are creating is far greater than the one that we averted or postponed. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the situation in Australia. Their GDP numbers came out overnight, and the Australian economy actually grew by about, I think, 0.4% in the first quarter. And of course, the Australian politicians are out there to take credit. They're claiming that it's their stimulus that turned the situation around. Now, how do we know that? I mean, we don't know what it would have been like without the stimulus. Now, maybe the stimulus did help the GDP in this quarter. But I know one thing, a year from now, 2 years from now, the Australian economy would have been even better without that stimulus. But of course, whatever happens, the government's going to claim credit for it. That's why they like to do something. If they did nothing and the economy got better on its own, they couldn't take credit. If they do something and it recovers, even if it doesn't recover as much, they're all over it. The fact of the matter is, the Australian economy is going to recover, not because of the stimulus, but despite the stimulus. And the best thing about their stimulus is that it's not big enough to do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, that's not the situation with our stimulus. Now, moving to some of the local politics, I had endorsed in the governor's race in the Republican primary Steve Lonigan in New Jersey. And that primary happened yesterday. And he was running against, a standard Republican in the spirit of George Bush or John McCain or any of the run-of-the-mill Republicans that we have. And Lonigan is a real limited government, laissez-faire, sound money, cut government, shrink government, cut taxes kind of guy that the Republicans would want in office. And if this wasn't a primary, if the Republicans could have selected the governor and put him in there, they would have taken Lonigan hands down. The reason that the election went to Christie was because he was running as the more electable candidate, that the public was not ready for massive cuts in government spending and big cuts in taxes. So we needed to put up somebody who was more like his opponent. And that's what we did. So now the Republicans have a candidate that's indistinguishable from Corzine, the incumbent Democrat. So as far as I'm concerned, the election is now meaningless. Who cares who wins? And the Republicans have a hollow victory because all they've done is replaced one big government guy with another, even if they win. And of course, as I said before, if you give the public a choice between a Democrat and a Democrat, they'll take the Democrats every time. Now, some people might say, well, the fact that he lost, this proves that he should have ran as a libertarian, which in fact he actually is. Well, if he couldn't win in the primaries against a Republican, where there's a big libertarian base in that party, how would he win against the Republican and an incumbent Democrat? And in the primaries, he's got media attention, he's in the debates. In the general election, he'd be nowhere. And, the media described this race as a blowout, but it wasn't. Corzine, Christie got 54%, and I think Lonigan got 42%. If he had more charisma, maybe he would have won. If there was a little bit more support, maybe he would have won. And I think what libertarians need to understand, and libertarian-minded Republicans, is we can't keep putting up guys that we think are going to win. Because that's what we did with the Bushes, and that's what we did with McCain. But whether they win or lose, nothing changes. Nothing is going to change for New Jersey. Nothing is going to improve, even if we elect Chris Christie. And so what we need is real limited government guys. We need real change. And the only way to do that right now is through the Republican Party, is to get libertarians nominated, get them on the ballots. And I think there's a lot of Democrats that would join the Libertarian Party if the Republican Party, rather, if it was more libertarian. There are probably more independents that would join that party. I'm not sure how many Republicans we would lose if it went more libertarian. Where are they going to go? Are they going to go and vote Democrat? I doubt it. So I think there's a real way to get that party. And the reason that we have to work through the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party, is the Democratic Party's in power. The Republican Party is not. They're leaderless. They're directionless. They don't know where they stand. They're in disarray. And, there's an old expression, if you can't beat them, join them. And I think if we do that, and if we work hard, maybe, just maybe, in 2010, we can elect some libertarians into the Congress as Republicans.